Well, hello. Hello and welcome. I want you to know what a pleasure it is for me to be here speaking to you in Israel. I was just in Cabo San Lucas in Mexico, and I took my daughters on a boat ride. Our guide was a sweet Mexican guy, and we were chatting when I noticed a tattoo on his neck. It was in Hebrew. So I looked carefully, and it said, Halev Shelo Bayadayim Sheli. So I asked him, do you speak Hebrew? And he said, oh no. I said, well, your tattoo is pretty cool. What does it mean to you? So he said, my heart is in his hands. I was thinking this guy's gonna live with this his whole life, and I didn't have the heart to tell him that his tattoo was wrong. But I thought, I'm gonna tell this story in Israel. It highlights the point that Israel is in the minds of the world much greater than its size and its population, and that's not just in the news. For those of you who don't know me, it's a pleasure to meet you, and I'm honored to be here with you. My name is Terrance Cohen, and I'm a senior engine programmer at Insomniac Games. I've had different roles in the games and entertainment industry, sometimes as a leader, sometimes as a programmer, and always as an advocate for indie and early career developers. Well, I've worked on a few good games, and you might have heard of some of them. אני מצטער שאי אפשר לי לדבר על משחקים שעוד לא יצאו. אבל... Okay, enough of that. I'm passionate about supporting agile and entrepreneurial teams, making awesome through positive development culture, and fostering talent through dedicated mentorship. One of the ways I love supporting teams and developers is by helping them unlock creativity through the thoughtful application of tools and technology. I want to spend a little time today talking about the communication channels between developers, especially game developers, who may approach game development from very different directions. When we talk about pitfalls and barriers to communication between creative developers and technical developers, we'll talk about the dynamics of communication in small versus large teams and how to break the math to enable large teams to function well. And we'll talk a bit about how AI is changing the relationship between developers. I want to start off with pitfalls, and the first pitfall I call the solution first trap. The feature request as asking for the solution. So here's an example. Hey team, for the next sprint, we need to rewrite the physics engine to support real-time soft body deformation. Then we need to build a dynamic weather system that tracks the player's real-world time zone to trigger an in-game solar eclipse. And during that eclipse, I need a fully voice-acted level 99 tutorial dragon to spawn, grapple the player using custom inverse kinematics animation rig, and breathe unblockable flaming text boxes directly into the camera lens. So what's the actual problem? What should they have said? Playtesters are missing the prompt that tells them that their health is low. That's the problem, okay? Game developers know the feeling of someone asking for just a quick feature that actually requires refactoring core mechanics. Hyper-specific solutions that create unnecessary technical debt. Remember that coders and designers are creative problem solvers. Giving them the tutorial dragon solution removes their ability and agency to do what they do best, to find the fun, to design elegant and efficient systems. The key here is mutual trust. That is, trust in both directions. Define the problem. Players don't notice that they're dying. Game developers will look at their existing toolbox and solve it in an afternoon. Consider a subtle red vignette around the screen, a heartbeat audio cue, or a controller rumble. It's elegant, it's cheap, and it's highly effective. Another pitfall when pixels and pointers are working together. I call it the working around the problem problem. We've all been there. You need a change, but you don't want to bother another team or another person. So you build a quick, localized workaround instead. This might also be called the avoiding the bother pitfall. While it feels efficient in the moment, you're actually creating hidden silos and technical debt. You might be forcing the system to operate in unexpected ways, causing fragile code that's hard to scale or maintain. And ultimately, these short-term fixes increase complexity, making the system harder to manage for everyone. So my suggestion here is have the conversation. It might be quick. The other team or person might recommend you go ahead and do what you were planning on doing anyway. Or it might take longer. There might be hidden complexities that make it worth solving differently. Many times I've found that the better solution is actually even faster or easier. Either way, you're likely to come out ahead in the long term by having the conversation. Have you ever noticed that it's harder to get things done in larger groups? So one way of looking at it is that there's actually a biological limit to how we scale teams. It's called Dunbar's number, from anthropologist Robin Dunbar. He found that the human brain can only maintain stable, meaningful relationships with about 150 people. That includes all of your personal relationships, all of your friends and family, and of course the people that you work with, right? Once a studio grows past that threshold, informal trust breaks down. And you have to transition from relying on personal, social bonds to relying on formal structures and communication pods. But even with 150 people, there are still challenges to getting quality work done. Let's think like an engineer for a moment. Why is it such a challenge to keep large meetings productive? And why do teams suddenly struggle to communicate when they grow? Now, I have to be careful here about presenting equations, because if I do that too much, then the artists among us will start tuning out and thinking about what they had for that delicious lunch. So let's break it down here. If n is the number of people, the total number of individuals in the group, we multiply that by n minus 1, that's the individual connections. Every single person in the team has to establish a communication dynamic with everyone else except themselves. You don't need to connect with yourself. Or maybe you do. That's not for me to judge. Let's assume that if you're connecting with yourself, then you're doing it on your own time. And then we divide by 2, because communication is a two-way street, right? If person A talks to person B, that's the same channel as person B talking to person A. So dividing by 2 removes the duplicate counts. In a small indie team of 4, you have 6 lines of communication. You can shout across the room before you push a commit. Now think about a team of 14. That's 91 lines of communication. This is where the daily stand-up meeting stops being useful and starts taking 45 minutes. For the engineers in this group, think about miscommunication as merge conflicts. This is where you have to start implementing complex project configurations, locking files, and building isolated branches, because human beings simply can't manage 91 active communication channels in their heads, while also trying to do their best creative or technical work. Adding a developer to the project means they have to establish a dynamic with every other person already on the team. So what happens when you actually do have to have 50 engineers to ship a game? If the math says 50 people is 1,225 communication channels, and that's not manageable, how does any AAA game ever launch? Well, while I was working at Riot Games, the company ballooned to over 2,000 people, and almost all of them were supporting League of Legends in some way. How do we make that work? Well, the answer is that successful studios don't manage one large network. They artificially break the math using 3 specific strategies: feature pods, human APIs, and technical decoupling. So let's talk about one way to beat the math, and that is feature pods. Or if you prefer a technical image, think of it like social network clustering. If you have 30 people on a single pod, that's 435 channels of communication. But what happens if you divide those 30 people into 5 cross-functional feature pods, like a combat pod, a UI pod, a vehicle pod, with 6 people each? So inside a 6-person pod, there's only 15 channels. The team can move at lightning speed. They know exactly what everyone's doing. So by separating the network, you just reduce the communication overhead by nearly 80%, while keeping the exact same head count. At Riot Games, we called it matrix organization, and each team would have exactly the mix of people and skills it needed to complete its objective. But those pods still need to talk to each other, right? The combat team still needs to know what the animation team is doing, and the environment team still needs to know what challenges the destruction team is dealing with. This is where delegates come in handy. They represent their pod in conversations with other pods. They bring their team's experiences over and come back with new insights and priorities from the other team. You sacrifice some redundancy for a big win in studio velocity. In software architecture, we often talk about decoupling logic. If systems are written to operate more independently of other systems, then each one is more able to change without affecting the other. Heavyweight techniques like messaging and object orientation are not the only tools you can use for good architecture, and often they're not even the best. So we decouple systems in our engine and tools architecture. If the physics code and the audio code are tightly coupled, then the physics engineer and the audio engineer have to be intimately familiar with each other's work. And they're forced to communicate constantly just to avoid breaking things. By practicing discipline in your craft, clean animation rigs, using the right kind of code at the right time, you don't just decouple the content, you decouple the people. If physics can fire an event and trust that audio will catch it without crashing, then those 2 engineers are free to exercise their talent without being bogged down by each other's details. Now, AI is one of history's most powerful tools, probably the most powerful in our lifetimes. But the risk and the mistake hiding in the corners is replacing talent with technology. Photography didn't replace painting. It freed artists to explore abstraction, shifting the focus from perfect documentation to emotional expression. Digital design suites like Photoshop didn't replace artists either. They removed mechanical tedium, allowing creators to iterate at the speed of thought. The mistake is viewing AI as a replacement for human taste, rather than a specialized instrument to execute the creator's unique vision. AI acts as the ultimate bridge by automating the technical how, enabling creators to focus on the artistic what and why. We should maintain AI as a tool with the creator's control to ensure agency and style and authentic artistic intent remain intact. When we consider AI in the creation process, the promise is clear. Increased productivity. Whether you're a pixel or a pointer, AI can help you work faster and achieve more. But we also have to address the reality. Your responsibility doesn't change. AI is a powerful aid, but it's not a replacement for human judgment and understanding. You own your work products from start to finish, and you stay accountable for their maintenance and support. You have to be able to explain the trade-offs that that got you to the product and how best to use it. Use AI as a tool to build, but keep your standards and oversight in place. Now let's take a moment to celebrate how far we've come as an industry. I want to applaud how the Israel games industry continues to grow and mature. 20 years is a big accomplishment, and my wish to you is Shetizku L'Mea Ve'asrim. I'm personally proud to have worked with many Jews and Israelis in the United States in the games industry, and I want you to know that we love and support everything that you do. We have an ability and a responsibility and an obligation to stand up for ourselves and for the future game developers like us who can be successful and will make their impact on the games industry in Israel and across the world. So what did we cover today? We talked about pitfalls and barriers to communication between creative developers and technical developers, including asking for a solution instead of defining the problem, and working around the problem to avoid bothering. We talked about the dynamics of communication in small versus large teams, and how to break the math to enable large teams to function well. And we talked about how AI is changing the relationship between developers. As a bonus, I want to tell you about what I think is the key to empowering creatives and coders to do their best work. And if you take away one thing from our time today, it's this. The key is to trust and support and then get out of the way so that talented people can do their best work. Trust, that is, default to trust. Assume that your talented colleagues are doing good work unless you see a problem, and then speak up. Support, that is about servant leadership. And always asking yourself, what can I do to remove barriers to my colleagues doing their best work? And then get out of the way. If you're hovering, then you are a barrier to your colleagues doing their best work. So I want to thank you again for your time. It's been a pleasure to be here. And I'd love to keep in touch, so please connect with me on LinkedIn. And please don't go anywhere, because there's going to be a band. The game is band coming up here. I heard them before, they're fantastic, so please stick around, and we'll have some fantastic music. Thank you, everyone.